What's a small act of kindness you were once shown that you'll never forget? I was in NYC taking a lunch break at a job I absolutely hated. I was sitting eating alone at a McD's, and after about 15 minutes this man in his 40s or 50s, I'm a 28 years old male at the time, goes up to me and says something like, "Hey man, you look really sad. Things will get better." And just shook my hand. Takes a lot for one adult man to offer that up to another strange man. Really cheered me up. One in middle school, my softball team lost a match. A girl from the other team walked over to me and handed me a blue pouch. At first, I couldn't open it, so I said, "Thank you," and walked with my parents to my car. After examining it for a while, I was able to open it and pull out this really cute softball necklace. I still have it to this day. I had to get a spinal fusion surgery for my scoliosis. During my week-long recovery, one of the nurses asked me what my favorite candy was out of the blue. I told her, chocolate. During her next shift, she walked in with a huge tin full of chocolate and a cute stuffed sloth. I still have the sloth. She also put up balloons and a happy birthday sign for my sister who was visiting me. Another nurse cried when I left and hugged me. I was literally astounded by their kindness towards me. I felt really bad that they had to take care of me all the time during my stay. But they really made me feel welcome, smiley face. Also, my surgery was successful and am basically pain-free. I broke my foot and was trying to limp my way across campus with crutches in the pouring rain. Someone ran over with their umbrella and walked across campus with me so I wouldn't get rained on. So once in high school, I ate at a Mexican restaurant and unknowingly threw away my car keys on my tray. When I was done eating, I went and asked a worker if he had cleared them off the table, and he said no, but that he had just taken the trash out to the dumpster. I remember going outside and calling my dad to ask if there was a spare, and he told me no. So I went back inside feeling humiliated and about to ask if I could look through the dumpster, only to see that this man had already dug through the dumpster on my behalf and ended up finding my keys for me. He just went above and beyond, and to this day I am so grateful for his help. Last year my son and I went to Lowe's to buy his grandpa a weed eater and a certain attachment that goes with it. Grandpa is a little older and slower than he used to be, but he does a lot for us. So we wanted to spend a little money to help make his life a little easier. As we get there, there's only one of the attachments left that we wanted. Well, there was a guy there getting it down for another customer. My son looked devastated. He knew how much his grandpa had been wanting this stuff and we were going to surprise him with it. My son looked at me and quietly said, "That's the last one. What are we going to do for Pa now?" Well, the guy overheard and saw the look on my son's face. So he casually handed it to me and said, "I think Pa needs this more than I do. I'll just get an IOU from the store." It was such a small moment for this guy, but it's one of those things that you witness that will literally help shape my son and his view of the world. After that, the saying, "It takes a village," didn't mean what I thought it meant every time I'd heard it before. Instead, it just made me realize that society, as a whole, is impacting all these young people in so many ways, and most of them don't even know it. I was around 19 years old in my first year of community college. My dad has lost his job and my mom was supported my entire family. We were struggling for a while. I remember being in my night class one day starving. I figured there'd be no dinner, so I told myself I'll go straight to bed when I get home and not think about being hungry. When I got home after class, there was a giant box of Costco pizza on the kitchen counter. Apparently one of our neighbors had bought it for us because my dad fixed a part of her fence a few months back. I think it stuck with me because A, I was so fucking hungry, and B, the chances of her bringing food that night of all nights was insane to me. It might sound so stupid, but I'll never forget it. At work I was complaining about heartburn once. I was still pretty new to the job. Didn't really have any work friends. Felt like an outsider. My life outside of work was pretty shit as well. The bartender on shift overheard me and ran to a nearby coffee shop to get me a chocolate milk. It definitely made the heartburn go away, but it was such a needlessly kind act. I don't think he'll ever forget it. 2 years later we're still friends, and she is definitely one of the kindest people I've ever met. When I was in high school, a guy stole my iPod out of my backpack. I didn't think I'd ever to get it back. Maybe a week later, a guy the first never really talked to came up to me and told me he bought my iPod from that guy and then gave it back to me. He didn't even ask for anything in return. I had just lost my insurance and my epilepsy medication was over $400. The pharmacist got me some coupons that cut the price in half. She didn't have to, and it was against company policy. I now work in a pharmacy in the chain, but she did it anyway. Very nice lady. Moved from a city to the country. I bought a large metal wine rack at a yacht sale without thinking of how I would get it home. As I stood outside my car measuring, knowing damn well it wouldn't fit, an older man came up to me. He asked if I needed help getting it home and offered to follow me in HOS truck. I thought, okay, I'm getting robbed, but it was only $40 and I couldn't get it home anyways. The older man followed me home and helped me bring it into the house. We talked for 5 minutes or so, and as he was about to leave I asked him, I just have to ask, what made you do this today? The man extended his hand to shake mine and said, just doing my good deed for the day. I was floored. I'm never moving back to the city, and I see this sort of kindness all the time where I am. I was working in a medical field, and after the course of a few days, I worked with 4 members of this family. Starting with the dad, who was just an awesome human. Then the next day he came in with his son. Later that afternoon, he came back in with his son again for his daughter's apartment. I genuinely fell in love with this family more and more after each member I met. The father, son, daughter attended the mother's appointment with her the next day. At this point, I was considering proposing to the son, as I wanted to be part of this amazing, hilarious, loving family. I informed them I regretted I wouldn't be there when they came back in 2 weeks, as I was moving on to a different position. They came back an hour later with a nothing but cake, with the sweetest card and an inside joke written on the outside of the cake box. It made me cry. My family life has always sucked, and meeting them was just so beautiful and healing. As a boy, I developed rheumatic fever and had to stay home for months to work through it and recover. When the lady next door found out how sick I was, she made a big pot of homemade chicken soup. It was delicious and full of healthy, fresh ingredients. To this day, Mom believes that it was this woman's kindness and love she put into her soup making that helped me recover faster. I transferred in the middle of first grade to a school that did ice cream Fridays, where you'd pay like $50 or $75 for whatever kind, and then you'd watch an educational video in the classroom. I was unaware of this when the first Friday rolled around, so I didn't have any change, and neither did the kid next to me. Normally there would be a few who didn't get ice cream, but this day we were the only 2. So the teacher called the both of us aside and gave us each the change required to have our ice cream. I think the biggest thing was that she didn't do it in front of the other kids, so it looked like we had brought the money all along. It was incredibly kind of her. She was a wonderful teacher outside of that as well. I recorded a homemade album with my garage band in high school and handed out a few CDs. A few weeks later, my English teacher approached me with 5 pages of notes on what he liked and what I could improve on. He apparently got the CD from someone at the high school and listened to it all the way through. It was over an hour long. He didn't know I was the singer and guitar player until he asked the person who gave him the CD. He said that if I ever got a shot in a studio, I would create something amazing. Thank you to all the teachers out there who believe in their students. It makes all the difference to some of us. choking to death on a roadside, and a nice guy stopped and did the Heimlich on me. Thanks, bro. When I was little, I was waiting for my aunt in a supermarket. Whenever someone exited the supermarket, the doors were automatic, so every time someone left, I stood by the doors and pretended to magically open the doors. One person said, "Thank you." Alternator died while I was driving home from university. Engine died as I exited the freeway in the middle of the night in a not-so-pleasant part of town in the days before cell phones. As I'm pushing my car out of the intersection, a guy in a truck comes up and offers to push my car to my neighborhood a good 3 miles away. He does so, and I'm pulling into my neighborhood. He simply gives a wave and drives off into the night. I never even had a chance to thank him. Riding my bike on a long trip through Canada, with about 50 miles to go, I had a major mechanical failure. Stuck on the side of the road in a foreign country, within 5 minutes at least 10 cars had stopped to check on me. One guy loaded my bike in the back of his truck and drove me 30 miles to the border where I could catch a ferry back to the U.S. Amazing kindness and generosity toward a stranger. He just asked that I pay it forward, and to date I've helped 5 cyclists who were broken down. In honor of that promise, thumbs up. I literally coasted into a gas station out of gas on my motorcycle. Then realized I didn't have my wallet. Some lady saw me patting all my pockets and that I was upset and offered to fill up my tank. I only let her put $5 in, which on a bike is a lot, but it meant so much to me. The time my car broke down in the middle of the night and my phone died and I didn't know what to do, a random stranger pulled over and told me, "We all need a little help sometimes," and I'll never forget her words as she helped me jumpstart my car. I've shared this story before, but I'll never forget this small act of kindness. When I was a kid, we didn't have a lot of money, so we often shopped at thrift stores. What I loved about that was that you could get 10 books for $1. So I would plant myself in front of the book section and make piles of which one I wanted to get, and then decided after I had gone through them all. One day an older lady saw me sitting with my piles and asked if I liked to read. I told her I did and showed her a few of the books I found that I liked. She smiled and then pulled $1 out of her purse, handed it to me and said, "Promise me that you'll keep reading." I was so happy and immediately stood up and said that I would. She smiled and walked away, and I went back to my piles, able to pick out an extra 10 books to take home. It was just a small act of kindness for her, but for me, having a random stranger encourage my love of reading and making me promise never stop definitely had a lot to do with my continued love of reading. This was probably over 20 years ago, but I still think of her whenever I buy a new book. After my dad passed away, my depression kicked into overdrive. I went to the doctor and got a prescription for antidepressants. While I was picking up my prescription, I started crying. When I apologized to the pharmacist for crying like a child, the pharmacist said, "You don't have to apologize. You recognize you have a problem and you are trying to fix it. That is a brave thing." It changed my perspective on treating my mental illness. I was trying to fly internationally for the first time to visit a friend in the UK in spring 2010. You know, that year that the volcano erupted and you couldn't fly into or out of Europe for quite some time? I rode up to Chicago on the train not knowing if I was going to have a flight or not. It was just all kinds of extra stress on top of the stress of trying to travel internationally for the first time. Ultimately, I didn't get to go. Flight got canceled shortly before boarding. The airline gave me my money back and I just hopped the train back home. But the flight was still scheduled when I got to O'Hare, so I checked in and went to sit at the gate. Couldn't eat, trying to read with a tear-stained face that most people were ignoring. This older couple came and sat right next to me at a time when the waiting area was pretty much empty and simply began a conversation. Husband and wife trying to get home to Amsterdam. Had been stranded in the US for days, but came and talked to me. didn't acknowledge the state my face was in. But they knew anyway. They didn't have to. And it was some very small kindness after a really rough day. I'll remember those folks and their kind, distracting conversation for a long time. I was bullied in elementary school and an older boy defended me. He became my first crush and I still remember him. I took my sister who's in a wheelchair to the cinema for the first time on my own. At the end, I realized I couldn't undo the brakes and was blocking everyone. I felt like crying because I thought everyone was pissed at me. But some nice lady helped me, then took me and my sister out. She said she once had a son who needed a wheelchair. This was long ago, but I'll never forget. I missed my train to go home for Christmas from uni due to a crash near the station. I was completely broke and knew I wouldn't be able to afford another ticket. Life just got on top of me, knowing I'd have to spend Christmas alone in my shitty student house and not being about to see my granddad who was in rapidly declining health. I was bawling my eyes out on the platform when a janitor appeared out of a hidden stockroom under a stairwell and brought me some tissues. He found out why I was so upset and said, "Leave it to me." Took me to the customer service desk and got them to reissue me a ticket for the next train home. I was so thankful I started bawling again and he went on his way. Then just before I was about to get my train, he found me on the platform and gave me some snacks and a can of Coke, and it's just the nicest thing anyone's ever done for it.